Hello and welcome to the Inside the Orange podcast, the podcast all about understanding the people around us. Today I'm going to be talking about one of my heroes, Simon Sinek, and how he is partly responsible for this podcast coming to life. This is the Inside the Orange podcast with Why I Love Simon Sinek. Let's get into the episode. Now, first of all, I'd like to thank Richard Lee for coming on the show last week, and I'd like to thank everyone who has taken the time to listen to the episode. If you haven't caught it yet, there'll be a link in the description where you can find the episode and all of the other Inside the Orange episodes from this series. I'd also like to acknowledge that this podcast is now brought to you by Anchor, and that you can now send me voice messages via them and tell me your thoughts on the show or anything else you want to talk about. As well as this, all the links for the podcast are now easy to find on Linktree. There'll be a link in the description as well as being available to find in my bios on my social media accounts such as Instagram and Twitter. The links for those will also be in the description and as usual given out at the end of the episode. I'd also like to say a massive thanks to Chris Webb for highlighting my work in his Leaders Retail Consultancy Bite Size the week before last. Chris is passionate about great leadership efforts that he has seen in retail and is always looking for great displays of leadership around the sector. And you can check that out on leadersretail.com. So today, let's talk about one of my heroes, Simon Sinek. Now, I've mentioned Simon on previous episodes of the podcast before, but today I'm dedicating this episode to all about him. I'm going to start with a regret. And it's about Simon's TEDTalk, Start With Why. This TED Talk helped change my life. As I've said previously, when I finished watching it, I was in tears. I felt finally someone out there has helped me to understand why I think like I think, why I want to do what I want to do, and why I feel like I feel. There are a lot of whys in this, as you can... Then again, it's called Start With Why, so it kind of comes with the territory. So why is it a regret? It doesn't sound like a regret to me as I say this, but the regret is how long it took me to find it. When I look on YouTube and find the TED Talk, and the link is available in the description, at the time of recording this video, it has 7.4 million views, and it came out 11 years ago. 11 years ago, and I found it in May 2020, thanks to a piece of work I was doing while studying, which I still am for the record. I'm doing a business degree, business management degree with the Open University here in the UK. But you know, it is a regret, but not one I'm overly disappointed with. That's the beauty of YouTube. These things are there to be found, and I'm grateful more than anything that I found it. If you haven't heard of Simon Sinek, he was in marketing for years and was relatively successful. But for him it wasn't enough. It didn't fulfill him, so he decided to work on something called the Golden Circle. Now, I don't want to tell his story too much because I'd be doing him a disservice. This is his story, and only he should tell it, so check him out on YouTube. But this is what he said that resonated so strongly with me, and why this podcast came out of the idea of Start With Why. Back in October 2019, I had an idea of a business about understanding the people in business, and how if you understood them, you could easily train, retain, and develop some exceptional people. And I started talking about it. People liked the idea and people understood what it was I wanted to do. But then they asked, how do you make money out of it? Now, money hadn't even come into my mind at this point. My answer to this was I didn't know. So I threw the idea away. I thought, there's no point. Now, I've talked about this in a previous episode, so some of this may seem repetitive, but it's important to the story. Now, I was disheartened. I didn't care about the money, but I wanted people to be understood better in business. People who've worked with me know that I'm more interested in finding the reason why you do work more than what you do at work. Now, I've led teams and I enjoyed it, but one day for me, that stopped. I'd lost my motivation for it. And that's when I enrolled on the Open University for a business degree. I wanted to find out why businesses ran the way they did. I didn't know what I wanted out of it, other than an understanding of business, and for the first 3 years of 6, if you'd have asked me what I wanted to do in my degree, I would have shrugged and said, I didn't know. Then this TED Talk happened. It was a simple link from the OU to this talk by Simon Sinek, Start With Why. And I played it, and I played it again, and I played it again. And it was like one of those moments of eureka. It just happened. It all came into one. The years of trying to understand people, the business about understanding people, and what I wanted to do, all came in one hit and said to me, this is my why. Now, I'm not the only person who this has happened to either. Simon has disciples around the world, and his works since have only opened up my eyes to the possibilities in this world, and how many people want to be understood in this world, and how many people are connected by this why movement. Simon's Start With Why book, I read it. Simon's millennial speech, I listened to it. And I've talked about it with a good friend, who was one of the early listeners to what became Inside the Orange, and what it was all about. And whilst Inside the Orange was in the making, and together we have shared knowledge of inspirational people that have inspired us. Some of Simon's other notable works have included books such as Leaders Eat Last, Find Your Why, and The Infinite Game, as well as his amazing podcast, A Little Bit of Optimism. I advise so many people, if you haven't listened to these episodes, then do. They are available on Apple Podcasts, but I know they are available where you like to listen to podcasts. Some of my favourite episodes of that have been with people like Bob Chapman, CEO of Barry Waymiller. I hope I pronounced that okay. Now, Bob works in an amazing way. The business and the people within it are treated like a family. And the culture that he created is something that I would dream to work for. So Bob, if you're listening and looking at employing someone, look no further. I'm available whenever. Again, I don't want to do a disservice to these guys, so give it a listen. Or a read. Bob features in Simon's Leaders Eat Last book too. And Simon has tackled some real issues in his podcast. Most notably for me was the one with his sister Sarah about loss. And you can hear a real authenticity in his voice. Not just in this episode, but ones which also cover sometimes very interesting and difficult listens. One of the hardest things I've had to do while studying with the Open University came very recently. After finding such a soul-enhancing and inspirational talk in May, Start With Why, just 5 months later, the Open University pulled the rug from underneath me and asked me to consider challenging Simon's theories, and as he has a background in marketing, is he just a salesman with a book to sell? Now, this is the great thing about the Open University. This challenge of objectively thinking is one of the main reasons why I love it. And I love having the opportunity to express my opinions. I'm not sure if that's very noticeable on here or not. Thinking objectively about Simon Sinek, in my view, he is not just marketing for his work. Of course he is. But the idea of creating an idea doesn't necessarily mean people are going to buy it. But if you start with why, then people have more chance of buying into it. Now, the phrase or the idea of I'm doing this because I want to make more money isn't a why, is it? The why behind the Inside the Orange is to help understand why people want to work for you. And for me, why my children need to be accepted into employment. And why the two of those whys, when put together, give me the comfort to know that the business will flourish because the company understands the people it employs, especially when it comes to my children. How do we do it? Is by having people like Simon Sinek in the world. And people who want to tell the stories about how we can make that world a possibility. So what makes Simon more inspirational to me than someone else? When you listen to Simon, he makes you feel like you're the only person he is talking to. I'd like to talk about a couple of pieces of Simon's works that have affected me. When he did his Millennials talk on YouTube, where I found it, he said that when he went into the businesses and spoke to these young guys, these millennials, he was told that after 8 months, they told him they didn't feel like they were making a difference. Now, I'm a millennial, And I know that there is a difference to my working career to the generations before me. But I know that the job for life concept that my grandparents' generation had no longer exists. But I think there is a belonging issue that we still have that's about fitting in and making a difference that still makes us want a job for life. We want to be in the job and leave if we decide. But businesses like Bob Chapman's and his philosophy can make people never want to leave that job. But we millennials still need to feel like we've made a difference in that business. I love the fact that Simon, who I wouldn't really class as a millennial, he understands this, and this speaks massive volumes to me. Now, the other thing I love that he does is about the golden circle, with the start with why in the middle. If you think of a business, and he explains it well using Apple, that they start with why they are doing it. They start with why they are doing what they're doing. Then they talk about how they are doing what they're doing. And finally, what they are doing. This made me feel like it was how people needed to be treated and understood to get the best out of them. If you understand what makes people tick, like what football team they support, what bands they like, or why do they come to work, who are they working for when they walk through that door? When you understand that and work with someone to understand them, then you gain their hearts and minds. All you need to do with them is start with their why. Now, if you feel like this has resonated with you today, get in touch. You can email, you can leave a voice message on the Anchor host. You can message me on Instagram or tweet me. But my advice to everyone is definitely do yourself a favour and find Simon Sinek, Start With Why, if you haven't already. Like me, remember it's never too late to join the party. And Simon, if you ever get a chance to hear this, thank you for what you've done for me. Now, on next week's show, we have the return of the walking wonder, Godwin D. Batista. Goddo is back, and my word does he have a challenge for next year. There'll definitely be some secrets revealed next week, as well as some great information about what's going on. But most of all, it gave me a chance to catch up with my old friend, and what seems like now a part-time co-host of mine. Now, if you have any questions for Goddo, then send them in via email or on social media or voice messages, again via Anchor, and I'll add them to the show. The links, as ever, will be in the description, or you can listen in a few seconds for me to tell you them. See you next week, guys. Goodbye and take care. Thanks for listening to this episode. If this podcast is something you enjoy, then please subscribe to the podcasts and make sure you like and share so more people can hear our message. Remember, if you have any questions for me or my guests, you can get in touch via our website, insidetheorange.co.uk, on Twitter @OrangeWatts, on Instagram @InsideTheOrange, or on Facebook on the Inside the Orange podcast. And finally, there's the email of insidethisorange@gmail.com. All these links will be available in the description. Thanks for listening, goodbye and take care.